So this new movie, Skinamarink's been getting a lot of buzz, and I personally think that it's fully warranted. This is a indie, low-budget horror film directed by Kyle Edward Ball within his signature analog horror-esque style, which can be seen demonstrated across the number of videos that he's put on his YouTube channel, many of which are also short films. And having seen it for the first time in theaters for myself a few days ago, I have to say that he has something here. Whatever this is, it's something that really hasn't existed in this form in film ever. Like, it's aesthetically extremely strong. These dark hallways, these eerily lit shots of children's toys, the use of public domain commercials, and the absolutely bone-chilling sound design that all adds up to feeling like a complete nightmare. The fact that something like this, that costs so little money and is so experimental and is so unrelated to any pre-existing IP, is proof that the horror genre really is a safe haven for innovation within genre. And I only hope that this paves the way for the conversation to shift more towards looking for stuff like this, and or people just creating stuff like this out and about somewhere in the wider sphere of media. Not necessarily the mainstream, in the broader scope of our contemporary media landscape. Now, I could go into discussing sort of the events that happen in Skinamarink itself, but really it is something that is best experienced. There are definitely a few moments in it, moments of deliberate cruelty that stick with you after you've left the theater. And those moments are best experienced in it, because I don't feel like any account of what I could say about them would really capture the essence of them. And that ties into the broader point I wanted to make in this video. I've been seeing a lot of discussion around Skinamarink, and a word that keeps coming up over and over again in casual discussion is immersion. Did this film keep people immersed? Did elements of it break immersion? Did elements of their watching experience break out of the immersion? Is this film dependent wholly on whether or not it immerses the viewer? And it really got me thinking about immersion as a concept. I mean, for one, yeah, the way we watch things absolutely has an effect on how it impacts us. Like, if you're watching the film alone in your room versus watching it in a theater or watching it with company, you're going to get a vastly different experience. But I think a film like Skinamarink does demand just a little bit more attention. But not in the sense that, like, details of the plot and details of the events on screen are what you need to be focused on. You need to tune into the wavelength of this movie. And what I mean by that is, people talk about, like, immersion as if it's a thing the movie has to do to you at all times. Like it's a roller coaster. Like, you are plugged into a seat and the movie is going to take you throughout its entire course. And if, the ride derails, if you fall out of the coaster, if the coaster stops midway through, then that's a deficiency of the movie. But I think that's fundamentally just not how movies work. And I'm gonna make a comparison that puts this into context. So a lot of people like meditation, right? A lot of people agree that meditation can be a thing that builds mindfulness, that can be an interesting sort of pastime to help you either refocus your thoughts, tune out of reality for a bit, just to experience a sort of altered state of consciousness. By and large, nobody says that meditation itself, if it's time to meditate, the meditation will come upon you. The meditation will act upon you in such a way that you'll automatically go into the meditative state. No, you have to do a series of things to prepare yourself to go into the meditative state. And I think it's the same way for film. The late, great Roger Ebert once said that movies are like a machine that generates empathy. And the more that I've thought about why I engage with movies and why I love art, the more that I've felt like that has held true. Because films do work on a emotional level, appealing to our needs and wants, in the parts of our collective experience that become hard to articulate in any other way besides narrative. And now narratives are a tricky thing because they do live in that abstract space. The way that we are meant to interact with so many of the other daily things in our lives is so fundamentally different from the way that we interact with film. We drive a car because spatially we need to move to someplace else. We eat food because it gives us energy and has a set taste based on the ingredients within. We take drugs or drink alcohol in order to have a physiological effect on our body. We reach orgasm in order to experience pleasure. And all of these things are like firmly rooted in chemistry and biology. But sex, drugs, cars, and food cannot be merely physical objects. Not as long as we interact with them. Because inside of our primate physiology, there is an anxious electric race of little light bulb people that just love forming narratives and stories and connections through these things. And it's our understanding of these things on a level relating to our collective human experience that gives rise to our more high-minded ideas. Culture, philosophy, language, law, politics, friendship, love, spirituality, art, ultimately. When we tell stories to each other, we create alternate hypothetical realities in which the elements included stand out because of the exclusion of everything else. No story can or should contain all of the complexities of reality, and no story will succeed at mimicking reality because the physiological effects of it are not one-to-one with our daily experiential understanding of reality. And to bring all of this back to immersion, it is my belief that immersion is something that requires a heavy voluntary component, rather than being a demand we place on the text that we are interacting with. Especially when the text in question is trying to induce an emotion that, based on our socialization, we would naturally not want to feel, like fear or childhood regression, confusion, pain, cruelty, suffering. All of these are emotions that most of us naturally avoid feeling on a subconscious level. Unsurprisingly, these are all things that Skinamarink wants us to feel as we watch it. It is the intended goal of the experience to scare us, to make us feel hurt and upset and sick to our stomachs, all the things that good horror should do. I imagine it's a lot easier to get immersed in a power fantasy, because feelings of validation, of strength, of wish fulfillment, these are all things that people naturally gravitate towards wanting to feel. And they're immediately allowed to step out of themselves and empathize with a protagonist who is experiencing all of those things. Immersion is a matter of permission, and there are many people who don't want to give something that would hurt them or terrify them permission to do so. And so, instead of entering into the film, they focus instead on maybe a nice bowl of chili or a slice of pizza or a handful of popcorn. Anything to keep them firmly within their own physiology, fully within their own involuntary experience of the world. Instead of voluntarily looking at Skinamarink as something that will give them emotions that they need to feel, that could prepare them for a time where they feel anything close to it in the real world. Or, if they've already felt it, expose them to that feeling again as a method to heal. Film isn't even a unique phenomena in this regard, because there are plenty of other things that people voluntarily immerse themselves in for the sake of a metaphysical boon. Think of tarot reading, role-playing, keeping promises, organized religion, the very nature of codifying our relationships, friendships, and family bonds. All of these are examples of voluntary immersion for the sake of caring about something that isn't meat and bone. Something that gives us more to aspire to than being ragdolls of DNA randomly deposited around a dying rock. Immersion is the ultimate social contract, and it's something that we are incapable of doing alone. Of its own accord, and by the will of its creator, Skinamarink is frightening, distressing, disorienting, all-encompassing, and powerful. But it's only one side of a conversation that it's having with you. And immersion is the least of your half of the bargain. In conclusion, Skinamarink? More like Cinemarink